Hey, DMDongo here with another review from the DM's Guild. This time we're looking at Ancestral Weapons by the Dungeon Rollers, on sale on the DM's Guild for $3.95. Dust off that ancient sword in the loft, because it might just be more powerful than you imagine. So, Ancestral Weapons by the Dungeon Rollers, what is it? This is a supplement that very much reminds me of the old 3.5 edition supplement, Legacy Weapons. And it was a really great supplement, and one of my favorites that I've ever come across. Basically what this is that it's a weapon that you take that it has some ancestry behind it, that has some kind of connection to either your past or to somebody that you've been given it to. So these weapons can be gifted, but they must be given willingly. It's part of the condition of them. And what they are is that they are weapons that start out maybe just a little mundane with a tiny bit of magic, and they slowly grow as the character does. It's a great idea, and one I really, really like. It means that the players don't feel like they're tossing out their family heirloom weapons. It's like when you make a character's backstory, it's like, I'm a knight, and the last thing my father gifted me was this sword, and you find a +1 rapier on a goblin somewhere. It's like, well, no, I mean, why would you give that up? I mean, yes, it's the magical weapon's more powerful, but surely there should be some intention there to kind of keep that ancestral blade, and this allows that path forward. And not only that, it gives you really good rules for how to do that, because the ancestral weapons are all powered by the spirit point system, and you have a number of things to choose from, and there's far too great a list for me to go into here, but there are things like being able to store spells, the basic stuff like increasing the damage or ability scores, or more complex things that border on like pseudo feat stuff, like being able to attack enemy spellcasters and opportunity attacks when they cast a spell. If you know there's a couple of feats that allow you to do that, but they allow you to do a whole bunch of other things as well. There's a really interesting one I really like. I can't remember the name of it right now, but it's a ranged ability in one of the ancestral weapons where if somebody moves within 30 feet of you, you can take opportunity attack and reduce their speed to 0. Very kind of Sentinel-esque, but not quite, and it's more of a ranged ability, and it's very specific, and it's quite a high cost spirit point abilities as well, so I'm not terribly concerned by the balancing. And that's another thing I should say here, is that all of the spirit points systems and the way it's held together feels very balanced. There's nothing that's going to really break a game. Now, I will say this, the weapons can't be handed out lightly. They are these kinds of things where a player must either do something extraordinary or have it pre-written into their backstory that they have this thing. And it's nice because it kind of takes some of the pressure off a DM to say, well, how much magical items do I need to give to a player? Well, if you have one of these things, you don't really need to. You can just let it power up as the players progress. Maybe in a particular time of need they do this. The weapon powers up, Samurai Jack style, where he kind of prays to his elders and they slam the hammer and give him his power back to his sword. Or maybe it just, like in quiet contemplation, they bring forth more spiritual power. The kind of decision is left up to you as to whether, as a DM, whether to allow your players to allocate the spirit point system or to you to allocate the spirit point system. Either way is possible, and it's really great that flexibility is kind of built into it. Now, the other thing that is in here as well is rules on how to create normal magical items using the spirit point system, which is a really great way of doing it, and I actually think is a little bit easier than what's presented in Xanathar's guide for crafting magical items, and it's much more feasible for players to be able to do these kinds of crafting because the times aren't measured in months, they're measured in days, so it feels more reasonable, as it were, especially for like a high fantasy setting. The other thing that's also in here is how to kind of figure out the history of these ancestral weapons, how they fit into the world, how long they've been in a certain family, how long that they have kind of existed in time, what they've done over that period of time, because these ancestral weapons would have been held by multiple people who have great importance, that would have done great things, slaying a dragon, defeating a kingdom, rescuing the princess, I guess, is a good one. But all of these kinds of things are these like epic level adventures, or rescuing the prince, I suppose, as well. Anything is possible within this context, kind of like these things have done great things as they've kind of gone through the ages. And then they have little like personality quirks to them, like things they do or things they might, because they're not quite sentient, but they might nudge a little. Like if you do something displeasing, they might just make you feel a little nauseous if you've done a dumb thing. And it's nice that kind of is there to kind of give you a good way of adding in the roleplay side of it along with the mechanical side. So it's very well married, mechanical and roleplay, and I really like that about it. The final thing that's in here as well is examples of ancestral weapons and examples of the magical weapons. And that's one that I really appreciate, because I think a lot of players and DMs will probably get choice paralysis when they see the long list of things. And it's a very exhaustive list of almost anything you could potentially think of for a generic weapon, and some really interesting stuff around sneak attacks or the abilities that barbarians have, and some stuff around monk. Like a lot of really interesting ideas and mechanics around all that stuff. So I think that most of it's presented there very well, and it's good that the examples are there so that you can say, well, what kind of combinations could I do? It's like, well, here's a list. Look at this stuff. See if there's anything you like, and maybe we change a few things. And the nice thing is you can make an attempt to change your ancestral weapons abilities. Now that's costly, but it's possible. Now, on to what I liked about this. I really liked a lot about it. I liked the initial premise. I love the idea of weapons that build in power as you go along. I really like the spirit point system. It's really simple, really easy to understand. It's really good to kind of like for new players that are struggling to understand how to build magical weapons, or DMs that are trying to build magic weapons. This is a great tool for that, because you can go, okay, well, I'm going to just pick this. Bam, I've got a magical weapon. That's of an appropriate level. It's very easy to work out the rarity of things with this system. It's very easy to work out all of that kind of stuff very, very quickly without having to have like years of DM experience to figure out that stuff. It gives you a very good guideline to say, well, this is worth this much, and if I give it fire breath, it's worth that, and if I give it +2, it's worth that, and if I give it this, it's worth that. And okay, well, where does it sit? It's legendary. I didn't want to give them a legendary weapon. I want to give them a rare weapon, or I want to give them an uncommon. Well, how many spirit points is that? I need to cut these things and maybe reduce it to a +1. And it's nice that is there for both new DMs and old, because it makes it so much easier to craft magical items. I really like the attention to detail and the lore behind all of the ancestral weapons, the examples for them. It gives a really good flavor for what these are supposed to be used for and what they're supposed to feel like as a player. They're supposed to be these weighty, worldly things that you carry around in reverence. If you think about things like Inigo Montoya is a really good example of a potential ancestral weapon. He carries his father's sword, the one we created for the Six-Fingered Man, or the Five-Fingered Man? No, Six-Fingered Man. And it's that kind of thing. He carries that weapon with reverence. And that's the kind of thing that your players need to understand as well, is that these weapons have been passed down for like hundreds of years potentially, and they should feel like it. And the examples very much do, and they give that good impression, which is a great thing for me. Now, what didn't I like? Nothing. I really love this supplement. It's one of my favorite kind of magical weapony supplements things. It's one of my favorite ideas. I really like this idea. That legacy weapon one from 3.5 was one of my favorite supplements by far. The only thing I might say is that it's very difficult to know for sure if everything would be balanced together, because the list is so exhaustive. So I think the one thing you need to be cautious of as a DM is to look at what your players are adding and kind of like judge it on a case-by-case basis, because there might be some combination in that list that means that you break something very fundamental. But I don't think so. I had a very good look without a lot of extensive playtesting, which I'm sure the dungeon rollers have done. I don't think I would be able to figure that out. Right, on to my rating. I'm going to give this 5 out of 5. It is really well put together. The art is amazing for it as well. I didn't mention it before, but some of the really interesting, weird weapons are just really cool to look at. There's this sword that has faces all down it. It's just bonkers. And I really love the kind of like interesting introspections between those. And I really love a lot of the lore on the example ancestral weapons. I really love the attention to detail on the roleplay side of things, because this very easily could have been just, I'm going to dump the mechanical and ignore the roleplay, but it wasn't. It's nice to have the two paired very well together, and it gives a good impression, and it gives the right, I think it gives the right impression for what these weapons are supposed to be, and it makes them feel as weighty and worldly as they need to be. Thank you. That's been DM Dongo. This has been the Dungeon Rollers Ancestral Weapons. Thank you. Please do remember to like, comment, and subscribe. Peace out.